So you ended up with JRK Steel, and tell me about where, again, kind of more about where they were at, and because you mentioned they bought out Duluth Steel, and we're trying to shed this sort of reputation that they inherited.
There's let me make a clarification there. They didn't buy out Duluth Steel.
Okay.
And that's, I think, a lot of where that unfair association comes from.
Yeah.
We took over the assets of Duluth Steel out of bankruptcy. Duluth Steel the owner voluntarily entered bankruptcy.
Okay.
So that we could facilitate the deal.
Yeah.
And
So you had a little PR issue there, and but essentially a new business, right? Essentially a startup.
Yep.
And that was a year ago. So you've been. How many of you on staff are there? It's you and the owners, and then how many employees?
We have 5 in the office. 2 of them are drafters, so they're not in a management position. They're revenue generating employees, right? But they're in the office. And then during the peak of the summer, we were at close to 20 total employees. So we were 13, I think, in the shop, something like that.
Yeah. It's for a startup, that sounds like a lot of employees, but in the nature of the business, it's just probably what it takes to run it, right?
And we have some growing pains, of course. We went through a few employees already. We try to keep turnover low in that regard, and it's best to hire guys, obviously, that you can hang on to and are going to be long-term employees. But there's going to be a little bit of that growing pains that you got to go through, and we have had and will continue to have some growing pains like that. But it was end of third quarter last year, I think, when they took over the building. Okay. The owner, Jared, he was working out of his shop at his house, doing smaller residential projects. And actually one of the biggest project he took on at that time was for J&RS Sunberg.
All right.
It was a fire escape, 3-story fire escape, I think, something like that in Duluth. Kind of a neat project. But he was working out of his shop at his house, and he heard that through a steel supplier, that Duluth Steel's assets might be available. And he should talk to the owner, so he did. He got in touch with the owner, and they came to an agreement, and
that was it.
Here we are. Yeah.
So what was it? Kind of a continuation of the work that Jared had been doing solo, and then transition into bigger, more commercial projects, or how was that? How did that transition happen, and how do you sort of go about starting the relationships there that you need to get business going?
So I wasn't there when they first took it over. I started early January of last year. So they'd been in business for a few months, right? But those first few months were kind of hectic and crazy. They moved their operations. They had a few employees that stayed over from the old Duluth Steel. They were getting to know each other, getting to know their equipment. Had a few hiccups in there, like you would probably expect. But basically, Jared, the projects and the work that we're tackling now, he could have never done out of his shop. We still do the same type of work that he was doing. We still go after residential hand railing or small commercial hand railing jobs. We do jobs that are a couple $1,000, like Jared would have done in the past. But we also got into the fabrication of much larger projects in structural steel. And part of the reason for that is the shop that we took over came with a petting house CNC beam line. Uses a hydraulic punch system to punch bolt holes in the web and the flange. It's if you want to get into bigger structural steel, you're going to have a beam line like that.
You need one of those, yeah.
Yep. So that capability that machine gives us opens the door to a lot of stuff.
Yeah. How many guys does it take to run that machine?
Just one.
Just one?
Yep. Just one. It self-loads itself. I mean, you have to get the material onto it, but then it has a racking system that feeds onto a roller system, and then it feeds the beam in, punches the beam. It has a coping mechanism on it that can also cope the web or the flanges where two beams intersect. It gets to the other side once it's processed, and it has a rack system that pulls it off the rollers. So you have to load the material onto one end and take it off the other end, but you can have several beams lined up on there, and it can process a stack of them without the operator,
Yeah.
really having to get hands-on much.
So in addition to that, what other, what exactly are you guys doing? And, I guess in a very kind of going back a step here, as a steel fabrication company, sort of the fundamental essence of what your business does and is, what is it that you guys do?
So we fabricate our bread and butter, our largest products by volume and revenue, are structural steel for the commercial and industrial markets, and architectural steel. Structural steel is your beams and columns and the structure of the building. The architectural is basically everything else. So stairs and landings, hand railings. There's just so many different products that go into a school project, for instance.
Some of these big commercial buildings.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot, a lot of schoolwork this year, and it's hard to think right now what all is involved in it, but you have roof access ladders and fire escapes, catwalks above the gym, hand railing, sometimes kind of fancy ornate stuff, although we haven't really got into anything real intricate yet. That's kind of a unique little niche. But yeah, so structural and architectural steel are our biggest products by volume, but we can fabricate a lot of other stuff. Custom unique stuff, signs, displays. We had one customer come in, they needed a ladder to access stuff higher up in the kitchen because the lady of the house was short.
Right.
And we fabricated a ladder. We could do fire pits. We've turned out blanks for machine shops around town. It's another thing. We fabricated lifting equipment for a company in town here that they use to assemble windmills. So it's the rigging equipment for that. So really, as a steel fabrication company, there's a huge range of things that you can do. In our first year in business, we didn't really try to expand into anything too crazy. We got to more button down what we have going on right now, and get that polished. But
It's been mostly commercial thus far. You talked about maybe wanting to get into the residential more as well.
Right.
It's a kind of a different market, obviously, I'm sure.
It's a different. The fabrication of the product is the same, obviously. A hand railing is a hand railing, whether it's going on a bank or a high-end custom home. But it's a different marketing mindset. It's not bid work typically, or sometimes it is, but it's a little bit of a different mindset, and it's probably not going to be as much business. It's hard to say. But I did talk to one of the contractors that we work for. We're doing a school job for. They also do high-end residential out in the Brainerd area, and was visiting with them one day when I was out there visiting the job, and they built a house out there, and there was one stairway in there that was valued at $90,000.
Wow.
A floating steel stringer stairway. I didn't see the pictures of it or whatever, but just sometimes there is projects in residential, high-end residential, where there is quite a bit of work there. So
what other, besides that, the machine you were talking about before, the beam
line,
the
CNC beam punch line.
What else? What are the other big boys that you got in the shop?
So we have a whole host of equipment. Obviously, we have numerous overhead gantry, cranes, trolley cranes. 5-ton cranes is our heaviest crane. Loads of jib cranes hanging off the walls for the workstations, that kind of thing. But as far as equipment for fabrication, we have 2 burn tables. One is both CNC. One is a plasma burn table. It's capable of doing about 1.5 inch thick plate. Holds a very tight tolerance, 0.3 millimeter, I think it's rated at tolerance. It's fast, accurate, nice table. We have another burn table that is a little bit bigger, and it's oxyacetylene, and it's capable of cutting up to 7-inch plate. We haven't used it for anything that thick yet, but the person that we bought it off of has used it for that. So we know that it's capable of making a nice cut on 7-inch plate. A little bit bigger table. It's got 3 heads on it, so it can cut 3 identical parts at the same time. We have a press brake, large CNC. It's 10 foot wide. I can't remember the rating on it for pounds, but for bending, stair treads, and that sort of thing. It's a press brake. It operates different than a sheet metal brake, so there's some capability that you can't do with a press brake that you could do with a sheet metal brake. We have a 10-foot shear, hydraulic shear. It's capable of cutting, I believe, 1/2 inch or 9/16, full 10-foot width shear. Numerous workstations and welders, obviously, all the support equipment that you would need.
Sounds like a fun place to walk through and take a
it's,
tour.
It's cool. You know, the first time I walked in there, it's like, wow, this is for real. This is big, high quality, expensive industrial equipment, and it is neat.
Yeah. What's the state of the steel industry in general? Is it just like, something like lumber where it's just a timeless kind of material that, or is there, is there innovation happening in the steel industry?
Yeah,
or is it,
there is.
What's going on?
But steel, the Empire State Building, right, is steel. Steel, ever since the invention of the I-beam, steel has become a major structural component. There are challengers to it now. Mass timber is kind of a new thing that's coming out that in some ways could make a dent in the steel structural industry. I don't see steel going anywhere for a very, very long time. Yeah. I could be wrong, but what are you going to replace steel with, in many of these applications? Currently, right now, in the last probably 3 months or so, the price of steel has skyrocketed. And they don't, I just read an article, I actually made a LinkedIn post on it, but they're at prices at levels that I haven't seen since 2008. Oh. Scrap steel is way up. If you got a pile of junk you got to get rid of, now's the time. It may go higher, but right now you're getting good money for scrap. We would know because we we produce a lot of it. But, so prices are high right now, but that's everybody has to fight that same thing. Right. For us, we're more of a spot buyer. We call our suppliers, and we need a certain amount of steel. These kind of I-beams or whatever angles and I-beams, and we need it right now. And they give us a spot price on that. It could become challenging for us. Yep. It'll be interesting to see because some people buy from suppliers by contract. They know they're going to need X amount of material this year of a certain kind of material. They pay, or they're contracted for this transaction over the course of a year. That material is already spoken for, right? So those people get their stuff. When pricing goes crazy like this, they always get their stuff. It's the guys that are doing the spot buying that end up bidding on the rest of it, basically. So that'll be interesting. Yeah. But the steel industry in general, I would say is very strong. Yeah. Has been my experience. There's plenty of companies that are growing and thriving. Just look at the hospital job downtown. Yeah. That thing alone has 12,000 tons of steel in it, which would be about 3 years of full production for our shop. Wow. As we're currently staffed. Yep. That's way out of our league, There's as much steel in that project as in the Viking Stadium.
Wow. It's crazy.
That's a big job. Yeah. That's a huge job. Obviously, everybody around here knows that. It's the biggest job this town has seen. And I saw a post the other day. It's the largest private investment ever made in Duluth, I believe. Wow. They were saying $800 million. Now I think the last I saw was $900 million project. Yeah.
That has been a beast of a project and fun to see starting to go up. What about like the culture? What are you guys trying to do differently as a company? When it comes to culture, employees, with the business operations, what's different about JRK Steel?
So one thing my buddy Kevin taught me in New Mexico is about service and your level of commitment to it. If you offer service when it's convenient to you, if you answer that phone call when it's convenient to you, but not go the extra mile. Down in New Mexico, basically, when I was down there, there was no home. We had an apartment, right? But my family's not there. If the phone rang at 7 o'clock at night, there was no question I was grabbing it. It wasn't even a debate. I had nothing else to do, right? 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, sometimes in the middle of the night, we were out taking care of things. But basically, when the customer asks, you answer the call every time. There's no debate about it. I think that's something that we try to embrace, really embrace. Service to me means something different than it does to a lot of other people. And that's not to say that you always are going to bend over for a customer, but I think they should know that you're giving it your best shot every time. And sometimes it just doesn't make sense for you to take care of something. It can't happen, or for whatever reason, right? But you should always give it your best shot.
It's not for a lack of trying.
Yeah. But as far as culture, we're trying to foster a culture where every business has to make money, right? Otherwise, it doesn't even provide the opportunity to do something right by its employees. If you're failing as a business, it has to make money. But to me personally, the overriding goal of a business should be more than money. If money is your goal, your only goal, I don't think that's the right way to steer a business. You have to make money, of course, but if the reason why you need to make money is so that you can do better by your employees, better by your clients, you can grow your business, you can employ more people and do it the right way, to me, that's the overriding reason why you do anything and try to do it right in any business.
Right.
And I think, from my perspective, JRK Steel is no different.
Yep.
So it's not just another business. It's not just Duluth Steel reincarnated, right? We have a way that we think is the right way to do things, and it's not always easy to do those things, even though you yourself believe it. It's when it comes down to making a decision on dollars, a lot of times you can get pushed out of following those principles that you set out for yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But I guess in the steel industry, one thing I've heard is I did a LinkedIn post on this too, but it really happened. I didn't make it up. I didn't just write a cute story and put it out there. But I showed up on a job site. I try to make it to every job that we send a package to. If it's a little really small railing or something, maybe not. But any job of any size, I try to make it out there. And basically what I do is I beg for feedback. I'll beg if I have to, literally. Like, give me something. I want to know, I ask the guys on the ground who are erecting this steel, who are not necessarily the ones paying our bills, what could we do better? What could we do different, even if it's something small? And obviously I talk to the project managers, the project engineers, sometimes the building owners, although generally we're working through a general contractor. So, but I go out, I look at the job, boots on the ground, actually get in there and ask the people, meet the people. And I was doing that. I was up on the range, and this gentleman I was visiting with says, "Who are you with?" I said, "I'm with the steel company, JRK Steel. We fabricated and supplied the steel." He said, "Really?" He goes, "I have never," and this was an older iron worker. He said, "I have never seen the steel fab company show up on a job unless there was a major problem." And a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, no kidding. I couldn't believe it. Right? How do you not show up to check on your product?
It's like just common sense to you, but
right. Just because you're not the one, tightening bolts on the project, it's still very much your performance is affecting theirs. It's hand in hand. And for you not to go out and ask tells me that there's a lack of concern from the traditional players in the industry to do anything to make it better. And if I can help out my clients or my customers or the steel erector, even though they aren't the ones paying us, right?
Yep.
If I can help them out and it's no sweat off my back, why wouldn't I do that?
Right.
Anyway, so
that's a great story.
He told me that on one job.
Yeah.
The next 3 jobs that I went to in that week, I asked them. And all 4 companies told me the same thing.
Yeah.
That nobody ever shows up from the steel company unless there's something wrong.
Right.
And they got to come out and put out a fire.
Yeah.
So our approach in that regard, I would say from what people are used to, is apparently very different.
Yeah.
I think it's hugely important to show up, show your face, and it's not an act on my part.
Right.
It's
just like your nature by default.
Right.
Like you said, you just showed up. You're not second guessing it. It's just
And when you ask those questions, if you really want to know the answers, it's you don't have to act.
Yeah.
But if we have as a business have some issue in the field and nobody ever gets back to us, and there's a negative feeling among somebody about it, and we never hear about it, how does that benefit us as a company?
Right. I think that's the difference in the trades from what I've seen, and in the construction industry in general. That's the difference to me between the good companies and the great companies, or the the mediocre companies and the great companies, is they care about people, and it's that really simple philosophy of just like people are important.
Right.
And for some reason, that seems to get left behind, I think, in the trades, or just even for customers. I think sometimes there's maybe just the stereotype that's not important, But I think the companies that are really moving their industries forward and changing things are the ones that care about the people. That's what I've seen consistently across the board.
Yeah, I would agree. And traditionally construction isn't. Lately, it's been a little different. The companies like J&RS are kind of trending on a little more toward the cutting edge of certain things. But traditionally, construction and for sure the steel industry, they're old school, right? They're slow to adapt to things. You don't just reinvent a steel mill, right? So they're slow to adapt to change and things like that. But I see indicators in the industry where there are beginning to be, you're starting to see movements towards new kind of cutting edge ways of thinking, I guess. Equipment is always evolving, and there's some really, really neat, interesting equipment that we hope to be able to invest in before too long, that is kind of revolutionizing the industry. Yeah.
It makes sense. Like, why not do things differently if you can? And that's this podcast is called The Innovative Builder. That's really I think the core of what we're getting at. And
I have a saying that I can't remember where I got it from, if I came up with it myself or not, but basically I remember as a younger guy in road construction, I was the young guy on the crew, go-getter, right? I always had a new idea, different way. Why don't we try it this way? And we had this old guy running a loader, Denny. Loved him to death, good guy, right? But he would always say something like, well, we've been doing it this way for 20 years.
Right.
It's never failed us yet. Why do you try to fix what's not broken? My thought when he said that was, Denny, if you've been doing something for 20 years the same way in the year 2010 or whatever it was, you're probably doing it wrong now. Because there's a better way.
Right.
Things change, There's innovation everywhere, all around you. And sometimes it's right in front of you, and you don't see it for the trees.
Right.
So that's kind of my philosophy on that.
Yeah. So kind of moving towards the conclusion here. So you guys have had a good first year, it sounds like. You're going for a second year. What are your goals going forward? What's sort of the next step for JRK?
Well, we set company goals. When I started in January, it was the beginning of a calendar year, right? And I remember sitting down and asking the guys, so what are your expectations this year? Well, it's kind of difficult. You went from a little shop at somebody's house, right, doing smaller projects, to boom, this is for real.
Mm-hmm.
We're set up to be a major player in the industry in this area,
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a wild guess.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. It was really hard to judge where we were going to be. So we kind of threw out some ideas, and there was a wide range amongst us what we were going to do. And I would say we pretty much nailed right in the middle of that range, which I guess would be on par with our expectations.
Yeah.
But none of us would have at the beginning of last year said, I guarantee you we're going to do this.
Right. Yeah.
So we feel very fortunate
Got some confidence going
to
forward.
have done that. And it's not just the revenue or the amount of business that we did or the amount of steel we put out. To me, as a business development manager, it's how many connections did we make?
Mm-hmm.
Where did our name get out to? How many people have a level of trust with us now that hadn't even heard of us a year ago, right? So for this next year, we have a little better idea, kind of, where we're headed and what we're doing. We have some exciting things. We're investing in rebar a little more, getting into rebar fabrication, because we've heard numerous times that there's no good coverage, but there's a need for more coverage in this area, specifically for fabricated rebar. And we looked into it, and there is tremendous potential there.
Yeah.
But
again, what is a rebar application besides? I'm just thinking from a residential standpoint of the foundations and
right. So a typical ICS house, you could have a load of stirrups in there, but you got your grid in the floor typically, and your verticals and horizontals, in the walls in an ICF house. But a typical conventional construction home, you have either a concrete basement that may have rebar in it, or a slab. It's not a huge amount. In the commercial and especially in the industrial markets, if you just go look at the amount of rebar they put in that new wall by the lake walk by Canal Park, it's unbelievable amount of rebar.
Yeah.
And we actually looked at that project. I'm not sure we could have been competitive or not, but we looked at it to bid it, and we didn't.
Yeah.
But the mining applications around here, the paper mills, mining, all the heavy industry, bridges. If you see the bridge project going on down at 27th Ave, there's huge rebar grids in there, prefabricated cages of different kinds. Even today, I talked to some electricians. They use rebar in their light pole bases. And that's something that hadn't occurred to me. If a friend didn't tell me on LinkedIn that you should talk to electricians,
right,
I don't know that I would ever thought of it.
Yeah.
But they've been going to littler shops, to get their hoops made so they can fabricate these little cages for light pole bases, and that's something that we definitely can be competitive on. We have a nice new fabrication machine that shears and bends it, and but we see this year as kind of there's definitely potential for growth, no question. From if we can build off what we did last year, and keep going in the right direction, it's almost impossible not to grow.
Yeah.
Because now we have relationships. Last year we didn't.
Right.
We started at ground zero.
Yep.
Every job we did with a general contractor was our first.
Yep.
So they're taking a little bit of a risk. They're working with somebody they haven't known. Now, once you've developed a relationship with them and they have a level of trust with you, we would expect that we would get more and more shots.
Continue to progress. Yeah. Well, we'll have to come by and check out the shop at some point.
Yeah.
Sounds like a cool place to visit. So, and I know we'll be pretty close by down there at the showroom here pretty soon. So,
quarter mile away. Or
yeah. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Nathan, and best of luck to you guys in this new year, and just keep it up. We'll see you on LinkedIn, huh?
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's It's my first podcast.
Yeah,
so
you did great.
I don't
Crushed
know if
it.
I bombed it or what. But,
I don't think we'll have to do too much editing, so I think you did a good job.
Cool.
All right.
Okay, thanks.